Welcome to the $300 Bike Challenge. Time is running out, and the deadline to Gooseberry Mesa fast approaches. In this episode, we all finish building our bikes and get ready to take them to Gooseberry Mesa. This is my buddy Brian. The other day he came over and saw the state of those Judy XCs I'm trying to salvage, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I've got a bike I will sell you, but I want the frame back, but you can have the drivetrain." So he sold this to me for $100, and that's in my budget. And now I have brakes, shifter, fork, a Bomber Z1.
Yep.
No?
Yeah, I think it is a Z1.
Might be a Z1 CR.
Yeah.
2001 fork. Oh,
XTR.
beauty.
XTR hubs.
Woo!
Mavic. Old school Mavic.
517s, baby.
517s, yeah.
That's what came on the Zascar. So, Brian, you made this possible. You saved me. I would have spent almost that much getting that stupid fork semi-rideable.
This bike has sat like this for 8 years.
Currently I'm changing the brake arms and brake pads because that's one of the upgrades we need to do on this bike. So these are the brake pads and brake arms that we're going to put on the bike. And we got these brake arms used and these brake pads new.
So we went and bought some new bars. It's got a 50 millimeter stem. The bars are 780 millimeters wide, and there's 30 millimeter guys. So and the grips are completely new. We got the whole set for $50, which is a great deal. These are 630 millimeter bars with a 95 millimeter stem. And then because of the size of the clamp, we had to buy a new stem, and it might be a little bit short of the stem, but I think it's going to be okay because the bars are really great. And we couldn't have just switched out the bars because of the size of the clamp. We needed new grips anyway, and so I think that worked out great. And because there's only $50, we've got plenty of room left in the budget to do anything else that we're going to need to do. So yeah, I'm excited.
First ride with the new bars, and we got the rear shock set up. How is it?
Good. I think that's probably a good amount of air.
Okay, how the bars?
Good.
Does it feel too short?
No, I think it's fine because they're wider, so I'm a little further forward.
Okay.
Back in the 90s, most things could be removed with a 5mm Allen. It's actually pretty amazing how many things can come apart with this one tool. And I miss those days. I get why we don't now, because you can put a lot of torque on a 5mm, and it wouldn't take much for someone to completely over torque some small bolt that should otherwise be small, but man, it sure makes it nice when almost all the bolts are removed with this. Sorry for all the nostalgia, but that's what you're gonna get when you build a 90s bike back up. This is how we used to track our speed and odometer. We ran these little wires. There's a magnet on the wheel, and every time it goes by the sensor, it records that. You put in your wheel circumference, and then it would calculate how far you've ridden, how fast you're riding, all that stuff. This fork's a huge upgrade over that Judy that was welded and rusted together. This is a 2001 Marzocchi Bomber Z2 Atom Race. It's a coil shock. They were heavy. It's 80mm travel, which is actually cool. That's what the GT was designed around. This brings back the memories. In 98 or 99, I bought a Marzocchi Z1 CR. It was the 150mm travel version of this, which is pretty wild to have a 150mm fork back then on my hardtail, but it made it really slack and it was super fun. And I only weighed like 110 pounds, so I only used like half the travel. But man, that thing completely changed riding for me. I remember watching Brett Tippie, Wade Simmons, and all those guys in the Cranked movies be sponsored by Marzocchi, and I was so glad I switched to it. I'm stoked to have this on my bike, and it's got those amazing XTR V-brakes, and they've got this little parallelogram thing here so that your pads always stay parallel when they're being pushed in, which is awesome. It was super fun talking to Brian because his story is the same of most of ours. He was in college, going to med school, and he was saving up, and he would buy all these parts on crazy clearance. You used to get these crazy clearances like at Performance Bike or whatever. So he saved up and got a Chris King headset at a huge discount. Maybe it was the color they didn't want, or who knows. But he bought this whole thing over the period of a year or two, saving up and buying the best parts. And that was my story as well. Except I worked in a bike shop, so I got them cheaper and I didn't have to wait as long. But I remember waiting a couple weeks to build up a bike. Boy, things are different now when we're waiting months and months to get our parts. Here we've got the old Derailleur XT Holotech cranks. I can't remember if these are square taper or splined. I hope they're splined. They're splined! That is so cool!
I'm gonna put a disc tab back here. Actually, this is a post mount disc tab from Paragon Machine Works. But these are about 40 bucks plus the barrel nuts that go in there, another couple bucks, and so that just doesn't fit with the $300 theme. So I'm actually just gonna build an IS brake mount out of some 1/4 inch or 3/16 plate that I in my scrap pile. It's just left over from some other Jeep project or something. I don't even know what it was, but yeah, I'll just make a 51 millimeter IS mount, and that will fit the budget. Unfortunately, with this build, I got to stick with the cantilever brakes. I don't have the budget for the disc brake stuff, but I am going to prep the frame for disc brakes. This is my post mount brake jig with a Shimano 160 rear IS disc brake adapter on it, so that will effectively locate a 51 millimeter IS tab on the back of the old red line.
Okay, time to wipe this all down and get it ready for priming. This is the fork off the nice Karakoram that I sold to Isaac. I'm trying to match some spray paint to it. This isn't quite it. It's close-ish, but I'm gonna do some test sprays to see what the frame would look like. I'm gonna paint another spray can because it's round and metal and will give me kind of an idea what a frame would look like. Oh, ooh, that's bright. That's pretty close to the hardtail party purple. I actually think that could be cool.
That's my box of dummy axles. So you can see I have a bunch of different dummy axles, but they're all for like Cintas dropouts and through axle stuff. So I didn't have one that would fit a 135 millimeter QR. So I had some 3/4 inch bar stock, and I actually made my own dummy axle. This is 135.5 millimeters, just to kind of help spread the dropouts a little bit. That drops in there just like that, and I can now locate the disc tab. Here we are with the dummy axle installed in the frame, and we've got the post-punk adapter on there along with the IS adapter. So I just need to cut out a plate with 2 holes spaced 51 millimeters, and it'll just sit right on this dropout and go up the seat stay. And I might need to braze in a little reinforcement tube right there, just so the seat stay doesn't crack eventually. Yeah, you can see kind of how it lines up. Should be pretty cool, even though I can't use this disc brake in the challenge. I think I might hang on to this bike after the $300 challenge is over and spend a few more dollars on it. I'm going to turn this into a 51 millimeter rear IS disc brake mount. So I'm just brazing this disc brake tab on to the rear of the frame here. I tack welded it in place with a welder, and then I was coming back in to braze it because it looks a lot nicer, and I have lots more experience brazing this stuff together than I do welding it. Looks beautiful. Do a little cleanup work with the file and you won't be able to tell where one piece starts and the other one ends.
I should have done this before I painted it, but this seat tube's longer than I want. I've cut down seat tubes on lots of frames. I'm going to cut this one down and cut a new relief slit. Oh, looks great. Alright, we got a new relief on the front. Took at least an inch off. That means I can lower my seat even more since I don't have a dropper. Here is my seat collar that I've trimmed down. I'm running it backwards, and I had to thin it down a little bit to clear the weld area on the seat tube here. But it's gonna go nice and smooth on there now. Nobody will notice it. I'm tempted to paint it silver to match the silver headset I got going on. We'll see. I need to get over making this look perfect and just get it together, ride it a bit, see what works, and then make changes. I didn't shake my paint can enough before I sprayed it. It was a little bit cold and it came out thick and clumpy, and I've got runs all over this thing. So I'm sanding it today to put on another color to fix all these runs. I'm putting way too much work into this, and it's all for that nostalgic value because I love the old steel GTs, but it is not worth the time and energy I'm putting into this. When you give it a light sanding, all the bumps and drips and stuff stand out, so it's easier to pay attention to them. For some dumb reason, I care way too much about how this looks. 90% of the time spent on this build has been for looks. We're riding in a week, and I don't even have a rideable bike. The paint's still gonna be wet for the next 3 days. Check out how bad this drip is on this one. I don't know if you can see it well in the light, but man, bad drip. The color turned out cooler than I thought though. I'm really digging the color. I'm using Bondo spot and glazing putty. This is the same stuff I used on my Banshee to clean up a couple nicks. There are just a few dents in this frame that I'm seeing, so I'm just putting a slight dab on it. It dries real fast, like maybe an hour max, and then I can sand it down and make it look real nice. All right, I'm out of time. This has got to be my final coat. If it has drips or whatever, so be it.
So we are all done with our upgrades on the Tandem. We got the bike for 180, changed out the brakes. We got these brake arms, often bike from the 90s. They were used, got them for about 10 bucks. Got some new brake pads off Amazon, $5 for the whole set of brake pads, front and rear. And then the levers we got off Amazon, and those were $16. Used the same cables, everything else up here. So then moving on to the cockpit, we swapped out for a quill stem adapter so that we can use a standard modern style stem. Now this is an older stem off an older bike we also picked up used, 70 millimeters. Goes for about $10 on the local classifieds. Got these grips on the classifieds for about $5, and these handlebars were about $10 on the local classifieds, and they're a nice set of bars, but they're only 670 millimeters. They're wider than the bars that were on it, but they're not as wide as people like nowadays, and so you can pick those up for a bargain usually. Amazon did send us the wrong size adapter. We'd ordered a 1 inch to 1 1/8 inch adapter, but they sent us a 7/8 to 1 1/8 inch adapter. So I had to run over to John's house as I was trying to get this put back together, and we machined a little spacer on his lathe, so that goes from 7/8 inside to 1 inch outside. So basically we just took a piece of 1 inch aluminum and drilled a 7/8 hole in the middle of it. And then I cut it with my hacksaw so it would split and flare out inside there. So moving back, changed the seat out for a used seat. It's pretty hammered, ripped up. It's a pretty old seat, but it fits a lot better than the giant squishy thing that was on here when we bought the bike. So that was about $5 on the local classifieds. Then back here on Maxton's seat, also got a $5 ripped up seat on the classifieds, but much more suited to his size. This, if you remember, this had the suspension seat post on it, which didn't allow it to go down low enough for him to reach the pedals very well. So we had to buy on Amazon. I bought a shim to go to a 27.2 seat post that I picked up. So I picked up this seat post used for about $5. The shim on Amazon was $14, and then we got the brake arms back here, and then we picked up these pedals used. They're pretty in rough shape actually, but picked those up for about $5. Maxton likes those, so they're kind of, probably need to tighten this one. It's a little bit rattly and loose. That's all we've done to the bike. So we took it on some single track ride yesterday, and it did as well as could be expected. So we're pretty excited to get down and try out Gooseberry, see how we do. Ready?
2,
Tell me.
1, go.
It's finally time. I am excited for this moment. This is so cool. Already this has been a fun project. I've had fun for 300 bucks. The paint was less than fun for most of it, but the strip down, the searching for parts, the chatting with my buddies, taking pictures, showing them where we're all at in our progress. I have some incredibly talented friends. It's been really fun to see their progress. Oh, and I can't wait to show them this thing with a few parts on it. This is a 73 millimeter bottom bracket shell, and this is a 68 millimeter bottom bracket. So unfortunately, I have to get a different bottom bracket, and I'm out of budget. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. This is what makes budget challenges fun. I would love to just buy the right bottom bracket and run those sweet Holotech XT cranks, and I may one day, but I've still got the square bottom bracket that it came with, so I can run this. However, as you can see, it's purple. I used it to plug up these threads to paint it, so now my threads are covered in paint. And that's just gonna be like Loctite. I think we'll be okay. I could take a wire wheel and pull it off. I think it's gonna be okay though. As I thread it in, the paint comes off. All right, so the LX square taper cranks are going back on. These came from the first bike I had. And I'm running it as a 1x, even though it's not a narrow wide chainring. What's the worst that could happen? It is a 32 tooth, which is pretty cool.
I'm 2 days out from our $300 bike challenge. I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what I've got going on here. So, like I mentioned, I've been really pressed on time. I found a pretty much ready to go 1988 rock hopper. Just made a few minor tweaks to it to try and get it to a more something that I was more comfortable with. So why don't we go ahead and take a tour here. Upgrades I made, first and foremost, I didn't have time, energy to find a used shifter for a 3x6 setup. So I went ahead and stuck with the grip shift here. What I did was I moved them inboard, and I used an ESI chunky grip. That's kind of what I'm used to. It's what I've been riding for a little while. By moving the grip shift inboard, I'm hoping to be able to have a little bit more control and not accidentally shift during riding. Another big one for me was tires. The tires on this thing were pretty well dry rotted out. I felt like the knobs would just tear off if once we got on some rocks. Being limited on budget, I went ahead and got these. They're 26 by 2.25 WTB Trail Boss. I think it's a $38 tire in total. This is the one thing that I really went crazy on and really consumed the rest of my budget were the pedals. So I'm a big composite fan. They have a little bit of a concave feel to them. I spent $60 on that. So all total, bike $120, grips, tires, tubes, pedals. I am at $298 even. I'm gonna strap on some lights and go ride my favorite local trail, which is Paradise Rim. I'm gonna ride Turtle Wall up and then Paradise Rim down. Never done that on a fully rigid bike, so this should be interesting.
All right, here are the brake pads. Even these got glazed and got hardened over time. To fix that, I got my 220 grit. Scrape off the old hard stuff, get down to the softer material. And I'm just gonna keep going until that glazing is all gone. Look at the difference. This one's gonna brake much better than that. These XTRV brakes are probably my favorite component on the whole bike. It's pretty dumb how a little piece of metal can make me feel so special, but man, these are the coolest things. For wheels, I got two options. The LXs from the first Caracorum I bought, or these XTR Mavic 517s. These weigh a lot less. They're gonna be more reliable. These look cooler on like a retro build, but for this ride, I wanna ride the trail and enjoy it, so I'm gonna take these. These have 1.95 IRC Mythos tires. Semi-slicks. Perfect for Utah desert. So these are rim brakes, and this wheel is perfectly true, but the braking surface is a little bit dirty and contaminated, so I'm gonna clean that and show you how I do that. First, I'm gonna scrub everything with a brush and some soapy water. Those rim brake, the material transfers onto here, and it doesn't really act like a disc brake where it beds in, it just makes it a little slipperier. So these actually grip better when they don't have brake pad material on them. I'm lucky these tires are new and the tubes are in good shape. It's really hard to find 26-inch tires and tubes right now. Now that that's fairly clean, I'm gonna take my Scotch-Brite and use some of the soapy water as well. And that's just taking down that extra layer of brake pad on there. I don't wanna do it too much because I don't wanna remove the coating on the rim, but this will help have a nice clean surface to brake to.
Here we are again. I'm using the camera myself because it's like 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning and my teenaged cameraman is still in bed. So you'll have to bear with me. I want to kind of future-proof this frame. 1990 frame, has decent geometry, so I think it's worth it. I also want to set it up for an internal dropper since the external ones are hard to find. So I got thinking, like, how awesome would it be if the cable came out up here and it was internally routed. So I made a little mark here on the down tube up by the head tube where I want the cable exit to be. And I just about got out my cordless Milwaukee drill and drilled a 1/4 inch hole in each end, but I thought that would be lame. So I went ahead and just put the frame in the mill vise, and we're gonna mill a slot in it because that's way cooler than using a drill and a file. All right, so now I've got a nice little slot milled in the down tube here. And one thing I was worried about is, I don't know, these are butted tubes. And so that means that the tube is actually thicker here and here where the joints are, because it needs to be strong there. But a lot of times they get much thinner in the middle section because there's really no stress there. This bike, where it's got this extra tube in here, this might be a straight gauge tube, and the whole thing might be just the same wall thickness all the way through. The top tube, I'm pretty sure that's double butted, so thicker at the ends and then thin in the middle, because there's really no stress here in the middle of the tube. It's just at the joints. I tried to get it as close as I could up here without getting in the heat affected zone from this weld, because I don't want to weaken it. But I was worried that this might be a butted tube and I would get into the thin section. So you can see my little reinforcement will go on right there. It's kind of close to the weld on the gusset, but I think we'll be okay. Here's a piece of shift cable going in at the head tube. You can't even see it because it's tucked up in there. You can kind of see it, but it goes through that slot in the bottom bracket, and there it is coming out the seat tube. So yeah, there's cable routing for a dropper that I'm not going to be running for this challenge. But in the future, I will have a 27.2 dropper with a shim made out of a beer can or something because of my 28.6 seat tube.
It doesn't really start to look like a bike until the wheels are on. This is one of the most bent derailleur hangers I've ever seen. There are many shapes I need to bend this in. Look at how S-shaped that is. It's tweaked that way. What a mess. This is a derailleur hanger alignment tool, basically to make sure the angle of your derailleur hanger, this little tab that the derailleur bolts onto, is completely central to the rim. Close. Since it's steel, we just bend it wherever we need it to be, which feels super barbaric. So I don't need a full triple cluster in the front. I'm never going to be going very fast, and I feel like this is gonna be plenty low for me. But even just playing around with it here, I can drop the chain, and I'm not doing a whole lot. It doesn't take much to drop that chain. There's very little tension. So I'm gonna run the front derailleur as a chain guide. Just use my limit screws to hold it right where it needs to be. No cables needed because I'm not shifting with it, it's just holding it on.
So I'm just installing these Cool Stop Eagle 2 pads on my Suntour XCD cantilevers. They're a pretty cool pad. I used them on my BMX bike when I was in high school. They stopped pretty good. I mean, I could do stoppies with U-brakes and like hop on my back tire and stuff with U-brakes. So that tells you how good they are. But I mean, these are the old pads and they weren't necessarily worn out. You can see that there's still plenty of material there, but they're just so dry that they're like cracking and falling apart. You can see the metal backer in there.
This is pretty funny. You know how much I hate internal cable routing? Well, these old GTs have this groove tube up here, and you have to feed the cables into that port. Right now the problem is the shifter is only shifting 5 out of the 9 gears. The gears are all gummed up and the ratchet is stuck and it won't release. So we'll see if we can get the full range of gears. Ha! That did it. Just remove the little cable port where you replace the cable, shoot some tri-flow in there, and the shifter's back to normal. The rear brake is pretty spongy due to the 25-year-old cables and housing. I'm gonna lube that cable up a whole lot more. Tri-flow completely saved the day. I pulled all the housing out, tri-flowed all the insides of the housing, threw it in. It feels like brand new. It's absolutely incredible what tri-flow does, especially on these old bikes. I'm a huge fan. I'm not associated with them. They make my favorite grease and my favorite lubricant on an old bike like this. I mean, it saved my shifter. It got my brakes feeling awesome. Love this stuff. You've got to have it in your shop. It's super cheap. I'll put a link in the description below. This thing is coming together. I need to go take it for a ride. I need to cut the seat post down, so I need to see where my max seat height is. I've got a spare stem that rises it up quite a bit with riser bars. I gotta decide what I want to do for that. So I'm gonna go see what the riding position is like. Holy cow, this thing is so light. When I weighed the frame came in at 4.5 pounds, which is impressive. I'm betting this is 25.5 pounds. Let me go check. Wow, 25.8. That was pretty close. That is impressive for a $300 bike.
So I just installed my bottom bracket and the drive side would not tighten down all the way. It stopped before this came in contact with the bottom bracket shell. And so I thought, well, maybe it needs one of these spacers, because a lot of Shimano bottom brackets use the spacers. So I tightened the bottom bracket all the way down, put it in there, and one side stuck out of the one end of the the spindle stuck out 5 millimeters. This side stuck out 5 millimeters more than this side, so it's screwing up the chain line, and the cranks aren't centered in the bike. It was bugging me, but it looks like this didn't get machined all the way. Like there should be a relief cut in it. So the threads are actually bottoming out before the bottom bracket can bottom out on the face of the bottom bracket shell. I don't know if it was made wrong or I got the wrong bottom bracket. I mean, it says it's a 68 millimeter shell, but I'm gonna chuck it in the lathe and make a little relief cut there to fix it. Here's my bottom bracket chucked in the lathe, and I just took this little parting tool and I just kind of machined a relief down to the minor diameter of the threads right there, so that it can actually go past the end of the threads a little bit. It was only a $17 bottom bracket, so if this goes horribly or if the shell cracks in half, or the cup cracks in half, I won't feel too bad. But it would suck to walk out of my ride on Gooseberry Mesa, so hope it works. So you can see there, cup is fully seated against the bottom bracket shell. That makes me a lot happier because there was like a 2 millimeter gap there where the threads were bottoming out earlier. Now the spindle should be centered in the frame. So when this non-drive bottom bracket shell was new, it had some thread locking compound on it. I wrapped some Teflon tape around it, so just regular plumbing Teflon tape, 2 wraps of that. That will help to lock it into the bottom bracket like that thread locker, and it'll keep it from squeaking. That's a tip I learned a long time ago, especially like aluminum bottom brackets on an aluminum frame. A lot of times they can creak really bad. Teflon tape is a good way to fix that.
I'm super over the front. That is scary. My hands are so low. I want a higher stack for sure. Man, these brakes feel great. Oh, this is fun. I'm already having fun and we're not even at the trail yet. I just reached for my dropper that doesn't exist. All right, that's max height. That tells you how short I am. You feel the slack seat angle. You feel the long reach, and you feel the really low stack. I just feel like my hands are at my knees. So I'm gonna swap out the riser stem and the riser bars to get more of a beach cruiser feel. This thing's so cool though. I'm loving this.
We're here at the Valley Vista Trail System in Pleasant Grove, Utah to do the shakedown run on our $300 bikes. Here you go.
So we just finished our ride, and it was pretty good overall. I think I would have been a little happier with the lockout button on the rear shock for the uphills, and it's going to take some getting used to because I mostly ride a hardtail, but it was kind of nice on some of the downhill to have the rear suspension, and I'm liking the wider bars.
I miss the shocks. Cantilever brakes are barely adequate for slowing down. I really miss the dropper. I mean, I have a quick release, but it's just not the same. On my custom-made inner tube grips, the left one started spinning on the grip tube, so it was very unnerving because I thought my bars were rotating at first. Because the very first time I rode this bike, I bunny hopped the curb and the bars moved, and so it kind of set the stage for paranoia. Ride's good. I didn't shy away from any obstacles I would have normally hit. It worked. It's how we did it when I was a kid. Takes me back.
Most people know the hairspray trick for grips. You spray hairspray in them and on your bars, they go on slippery and then they dry. Hairspray works okay, but what works even better is paint. I know, sounds crazy. I am out of budget for anything else. Desperate times. I stretched these out, getting them off the other bike. Alright, I was afraid they were going to be too stretched out, but nope, they're going to be good. I would have loved to have saved some budget for my favorite grips, the Ergon GD1s, but that is not in the cards right now. Make sure it doesn't rub in the range. Yeah. That's great. There's only one thing left to do, and that is to put the Hardtail Party sticker on and finalize this build. Oh, that purple matches it perfectly. In the next episode, we finally all get together to ride the greatest trail in the world on our $300 bikes.